you all for joining us today. So I want to get started by describing the Afro-Argentine Diaspora Oral History Project. It's designed to uncover the history of the Afro-Argentine diaspora community in Argentina, in New York City, and across wherever that diaspora lives. A common narrative promoted within Argentina and globally is that there are no Black people in Argentina. This narrative of erasure around the African roots of many elements of Argentine culture, including cuisine, music, dance, language, and lineage, was historically reinforced through the education system, media, and official public history institutions. So today we have the Afro-Argentine Diaspora Oral History Project team together, and we're dedicated to documenting this vital history. I'm going to start by introducing myself, and then we'll go around and introduce, everyone else will introduce themselves as well. I'm Tatiana Bryant. I'm the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Research Services at Barnard College, and I'll pass it to Julia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Julia Cohen Ribeiro. I'm half Afro-Argentine, half Afro-Brazilian, and I'm an activist, filmmaker, and also a tour guide that my focus is Afro-Argentine history.
Hi, everyone. My name is Destiny Arias. I'm a sophomore at Barnard. I'm currently majoring in history and human rights, and I'm Dominican.
Hi, my name is Manuela Moreira. I'm also a sophomore at Barnard. I'm majoring in political science and economics, and I'm from Peru.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Mila. I'm a junior at Barnard, double majoring in computer science and film.
So I want to start by saying that Julia and I met in Argentina in 2023. I was really moved to support the work that she does as a documentary filmmaker. I'm really fascinated by the history of Afro-Argentina. My background is in Black and Africana studies, and my intent as a scholar and a memory worker is to collaborate with people who are doing this work in their local communities, wherever they are. And that includes doing as much as I can as someone who is based in the US and holds a relative amount of privilege within our academic institutions that are very well resourced, to try and do whatever I can personally to make sure that people who are doing memory work outside of the US have the funding and the support to really do it in a non kind of like threadbare way, to have real money behind it and real support. And so I'm really glad that I met with Julia and connected with her, and I'm really glad for Metro for providing this funding, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But Julia, I want to let's talk a bit about the Afro-Argentine history.
Yes, so yeah, for me, this is very important, very exciting, very moving in a way to having been able to do this project. I graduated in cinema. I studied in the University of Buenos Aires, and I've already made a documentary about one of the main figures of our Afro-Argentine history, that is Maria Remedios del Valle, and she is known as the mother of the nation. Well, she was recognized as the mother of the nation, but because she fought in our independence wars, and she went from being, a nurse to being a captain. So she was recognized by her peers, but then she was forgotten, as most of our Afro-Argentine history and legacy. So also my work as a filmmaker is kind of complemented as my work and my job as a tour guide. I started this project with Lunfarda Travel, that is an agency here in Buenos Aires that wanted to showcase all the marginalized communities and all that they also added to our history, to our culture, that is not really recognized, is not visibilized, as Tatiana was saying, has been erased. So in this work of the Afro-Argentine tour guide, on one side, I had to, research and study a lot. And I found this specific part of the Afro-Argentine history that is what this project of oral history is focusing on. That is, I think, one of the main expressions of Afro-Argentine culture in the 20th century. That was the Shimmy Club or La Suiza, that were these carnival parties organized by the Afro-Argentine community from the 1920s to the 1970s. And the people who were part of this carnival parties, of this, very important gatherings of the community, are very old, right? And most of them have never told their story, their experience. This has never been documented before, right? So being able to do this is very important. And I feel like, the tour, the Afro-Argentine History Tour, has not only become a place to, being able to visibilize to the world and using the tool of tourism to, transform this reality and this narrative, but also has become a place of encounter and a place to, really strengthen this global community, and while we can help each other, support each other. And I think meeting Tatiana and having been able to do this project as a result of that meeting is an expression of that, that we as Black people of the diaspora, we can really create a global community and, help each other guard our memory. This is Afro-Argentine memory, but I feel like it's also the memory of all Afro-descendant people. Anything else, Tatiana, that you think is important for me to say?
So why don't we talk a little bit more about the Shimmy Club and why it was created?
Right. So the Shimmy Club was created by a man called Alfredo Núñez. He was a Black man here in Argentina, and because of his work, his job, he worked in the National Congress. He had, access to other resources. So he thought it was important to create this space so all the Afro-Argentines that were kind of scattered in the city could, be together as a community at least once a year, right? So this family and this man, they created the Shimmy Club, and they had an agreement with La Suiza, so the Swiss House of Buenos Aires, and they could use the basement of this place that was kind of a theater or a venue. So they could use the basement to do the carnival parties 8 nights in a row during Carnival in February, March. So for many, many years, at least 50 years, the Afro-Argentines met there on these 8 nights, and they, especially played the candombe, which is an Afro-Argentine and also Afro-Uruguayan rhythm. And And it's very special to hear what these parties meant for these people, right? Because it was really the place of gathering, and maybe in the rest of the year they didn't see each other, but they knew they had that place and that event, and they really, expected the carnival so they could see all their cousins and see other Black people from different parts of Buenos Aires, and keep their traditions alive during a time where supposedly this population disappeared from our city and our country. But that's not true. They were there in that basement right in the center of Buenos Aires.
Do you want to talk a bit about why the Shimmy Club ended?
Yes. So I knew there's two theories I found out from doing these interviews. One, that is the one I knew, is that the Shimmy Club ended during the 70s because it's when the last dictatorship we had here in Argentina started. So in our history, we had 6 dictatorships, but the last one that started in 1976 and ended in 1983 was the longest and hardest one. So this dictatorship had a really strong censorship on these expressions that were connected to popular culture and especially marginalized groups. So during the dictatorship, carnival was forbidden. Any kind of expression in the streets, any kind of popular gathering was forbidden and seen as subversive, and even as these people were seen as terrorists, right? So all this kind of movements ended during those years. So that's one theory. And the other theory is that, the founder of these parties, of the Shimmy Club, died, and then his son started, organizing the parties. But it didn't last as long. So we have these two theories, and maybe they were combined, right? So this is something we still have to really see. I think even the people we're interviewing, they don't know for sure.
Thank you, Julia. So next we want to talk a bit about the oral history project design. So our goal for this project was to collect at least a dozen interviews during the grant period, which we're on track to do. We've worked with consultants in Argentina and scholars of Black Latin America in Argentina and in the US to help find our narrators from across the Argentine diaspora. We've interviewed Afro-descendant elders who attended the Shimmy Club or their relatives so far, and we've also interviewed Afro-descendants and African immigrants who remember the start of the 1970s dictatorship. We've hired 3 students who you've been introduced to transcribe these interviews and translate them into English and Portuguese. The Afro-Argentine community has been studied multiple times over the years, and some people in the community have felt exploited by researchers. And so we decided to practice an ethic of care with this oral history project by paying the interviewers, paying the narrators, paying consultants a meaningful stipend in order to participate and to help us with this work. We also practice an ethic of care by hiring students with meaningful connections to the community to transcribe and translate the interviews by hand in order to demonstrate respect for the testimony of this invisibilized community. And so we're not using AI or anything like that to transcribe or translate any of these interviews. We're also choosing to share the materials on an open platform. So we're using DCM NY through Metro. And we are, incorporating informed consent with the interviews. And we're providing an embargo period for an interview if that's requested by the narrator. And we're making sure the transcripts are available in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. So I want to talk a bit about the kind of nuts and bolts of funding oral history work and doing this work with Metro through this grant. It's really hard to find funding for oral history projects, especially if you're situated outside of the academy, and especially if you're situated outside of the US. So again, we're really grateful for Metro, to Metro for providing us this opportunity. As part of this grant, we were required to hire at least one New Yorker for the cultural heritage preservation work, which was required by Metro. So that's, I think that's also a great kind of stipulation for this grant. We had a timeline of about 10 months. So we started working on the project in August, with our deadline being mid-June. And this grant covers our research costs, our narrator stipends, equipment, pay for student workers, as well as stipends for community consultants. There are a number of challenges with doing this specific kind of oral history work with this community. So finding and connecting with narrators and their families. Like I mentioned before, the Afro-Argentine community has been studied in the past, and some have felt that they weren't treated well. And so many elders are distrustful of academics and researchers after having been burned in the past. And so it's helpful to connect with, it's helpful for us to connect with academics in the US and in Argentina and other places who are open to sharing their connections with people in the community. Another challenge that I think I mentioned a little earlier briefly is the relatively short time frame to spend down the grant. And this is, I think it's not unique to our project team, but both of us have full-time jobs and other responsibilities, including, families and businesses and other roles that we play in our lives. The students have class, they have part-time jobs, they have internships. So it's hard to juggle doing everything that we can to spend down the money for this in this grant for this project within that relatively short time frame of 10 months. And then I think there are just a number of other challenges this year in particular, with world events, including a really major presidential election in Argentina that's impacted our like how we can do the work on like on a day-to-day basis even. But yeah, I think it's I want to now like introduce the student perspectives and hear what everyone has to say about this project. So we can move to the next slide. And yeah, let's go ahead and start with Destiny, and then Manuela, and then Mila. I really want you to introduce yourselves more fully and share your perspectives on working on this project.
Well, hi everyone again. My name is Destiny. So the reason why I started working on this project is because it's something that really resonated with me as an Afro-Latina myself. My family's from Dominican Republic, so a lot of the things that I saw in the interviews, not necessarily that they mirrored my life, but they were things that I understood, that it was like kind of the erasure of like Afros in the context of like the history of like Latin America. Like I know for me, I study a lot about the Caribbean in my history classes, and I just thought it was interesting that this was something that was happening in Argentina. I know a lot of people tend to say that Argentina is like Argentina is like a European, like Latin country, and I never thought that to be true, but I never thought that that was something, or I never really thought about, oh, who are the people there? How did the diaspora go past the Caribbean? So for me, it was really interesting to see, and it's been very rewarding. I think it's definitely a new challenge because transcribing takes a long time and translating also takes a long time. And especially when, there's so many different types of Spanish accents just in general. Like already, like my accent is very different from an Argentinian accent or compared to a Brazilian accent or, others. So that can be challenging, but I found that when I really like sit down and I really pay attention to the stories and the memories, like it's very rewarding for me to be able to go through that work. So I'm just really happy and grateful to be able to transcribe, these lost memories because I like that, we can bring something out of this that maybe wouldn't have been brought out without the grant if they were just kept, like those memories were just kept with the families. So that's something that I just find to be really rewarding and I really enjoy it.
So well, as I've said before, I'm Peruvian, and I feel like what got me into this project was also that Peru has kind of like a similar history in regards to the erasure of ethnicities and this kind of like whole, I don't know, just history of trying to cover up all of like the whole genocide that occurred of like throughout the history. And I just wanted to learn more also about Argentina because I also grew up with this narrative that there's like no Black people in Argentina, which to me was always like, it sounded weird. It didn't sound like right. And of course, there's a whole history behind it. And it was really interesting to hear about like these perspectives that also resonate a lot with a lot of Peruvian experiences that I could really kind of like connect and see kind of like the similarities in this continent. And for me, translating this manually, well, what I didn't think was going to be as hard that turned out to be kind of like hard was just picking up on the accent and just, I don't know, like stuff like that. But I found it really easy when it came to just translating it to English. And I don't know, I think it just like added a different meaning, and you could see really how people try to express themselves. And yes, it was definitely a very enlightening experience. And I also like by doing this manually, I got to learn about like the different places in Argentina that one day, well, I hope to visit again and try to, I don't know, go to La Casa Suiza and all of these things that are just like mentioned in the interviews that I found so interesting, and how people got together in these specific places and how people built community and found so much happiness in dances and music and yeah, and just the beauty of the culture. And I really hope that this project will inform people about the history of erasure in Argentina and trying to put this, I don't know, put this like shed a light on this experience, especially with all of the politics, the political struggles going on in the country. It's definitely meaningful to try to see what people have been experiencing and to focus more on those who haven't really been listened to.
Yes, and I mean, for me, similar just to Brazil. I think Argentina and Brazil have very similar histories, as you mentioned, the dictatorship or Carnival, like the 8 nights of Carnival. Also like two countries that had like that widening the population was like the government project for many years, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people and a lot of projects to try to uncover that narrative of whiteness and as like the race of South America. Um, yeah, I had the privilege of using Destiny's and Manuela's transcript, so I didn't have to transcript, just translate it to Portuguese. And Spanish and Portuguese have a lot of similarities, but they also have very different uses. So similar words are used very differently. So I think that was definitely a challenge and trying to pick up like expressions. Sometimes I think like things work as expressions in Spanish and they don't really work in Portuguese. And like trying to decide when to change the expressions to make them more understandable to like a Brazilian reader, whereas to like keep it to the words of the speaker, so it's more like true to what they were saying. Yeah, and I think like Brazilians have a lot to learn from Afro-Argentine history, and it's nice to like understand a continent through its different like individual country histories.
Thank you all. Justine, do you want to introduce your clip? We're going to play some clips from the different oral histories.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context for my clip. So my clip is from Carmen Pelusa's audio. She's a dancer, singer, performer. She does candombe and rumba and a lot of that in the Argentinian like dance scene. And this one specifically is her talking about being on a show like way back with Palito Ortega. And I just found it interesting because it was kind of talking about the narrative of like uncovering histories that might have not been uncovered before. And then also kind of a little bit about the discrimination that her as a dancer kind of faced. So that's why I picked my clip. So I'll play it.
Y canté. Después hice un programa con Palito Ortega también, que estuvo Pocha, estuvo Alicia y estuvo Gloria. Éramos 4 que le hacíamos coro a Palito Ortega en el canal, no sé si en el canal 13, fue hace muchísimos años también. Hice cosas, pero que en realidad, como en aquella época, no había, nadie grababa, no había todas estas cosas, esta facilidad que tenemos ahora. Todo eso quedó como borrado, ¿viste? Que no me quedó, no tengo, ¿viste? Material para mostrar. Pero sí sé que lo hice y otras cosas más que la verdad que ni me acuerdo porque en aquella época te llamaban para hacer muchas cosas, ¿viste? Si sabían que vos estabas dentro del ambiente, entonces te llamaban para hacer cositas. Nunca cosas que eras relevantes. Yo, bueno, cuando estuve con Osvaldo Pacheco, la forma mía de bailar no la podían creer y me decían que preguntaron si era real lo que yo estaba en el baile y ¿sabés lo que dijeron? Eso me molestó y mucho, que eran efectos de cámara. No eran movimientos míos, sino que efectos de cámara.
That was my clip, just kind of talking about her on the show and also the discrimination she faced when they said that they kind of asked her like, oh, are these real movements that you're doing or is it just like camera effects? And she goes on further, like her and Julia kind of talk about the fact that, you know, there's still discrimination and there was discrimination, especially in the dance scene and especially being a Black person in the dance scene. So I just thought that that was really interesting. And especially because like I've also seen that happen with people, dancers, like in my country, the same thing. So I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, sorry, can I add something? No, I was thinking about how, you know, they couldn't believe the way she danced and they used something very absurd to justify that they weren't like her real dance moves. And I feel like that's, you know, the how powerful that narrative was, that even, you know, seeing a person in real life doing something, people, you know, in their minds, they preferred not to believe it was real. So I think you were saying that, you know, we really have to fight a lot of very, you know, very intentional politics of erasure, and how that really was so strongly internalized and still is in the common sense of people in Argentina, that even seeing something like in front of their eyes, they prefer saying that is not true.
Okay, so I was translating and transcribing the interviews for Facundo Posadas. He's an Afro-Argentine dancer and has been a prevalent figure in the music scene in Argentina. Although he focuses on tango, Facundo has experienced the changing history of different music genres and dances, most of them heavily influenced by African roots. Moments before this clip, Facundo was describing what like the essence of tango was. And in this clip, he describes what he feels the soul of candombe is.
Yo sé que lo tuyo es el tango, pero así como describís el tango, así como la esencia, el alma del tango, ¿qué podrías decir del candombe?
Es la libertad total. Lo he bailado mucho. Es la libertad total. Es la expresión sin prejuicio de una persona. La libertad total. Es el dejarse llevar, ¿no? Es algo maravilloso. Si uno intenta bailar por coreografía, te das cuenta que está inventando algo que está muerto, sin sentimiento. Ves a los bailarines y, bueno, ahora ya yo no he visto mucho, ¿no? Pero no hay. Con el tango pasa lo mismo. Si no hay bohemia, no hay expresión. Y con el candombe pasa lo mismo. Yo escucho a veces se juntan unos chicos acá y tocan una cosa, traca, todo igual, no hay nada. Y sus bailes se los quitó, o sea, que están bailando break dance o candombe, no expresan absolutamente nada.
I found this clip really interesting, especially because later in the interview, he kind of talks about dancing during Videla's dictatorship. And he talks about how, especially the Black community was very targeted and how they weren't really allowed to express themselves. And though it wasn't illegal to go out and dance, it was illegal to hang out in large groups. And the Black community was especially targeted, even though there was not really a reason why. And a lot of people stopped going dancing because they were afraid, women were afraid of getting groped, because that's what would sometimes happen when the police came in, and they were just afraid of getting arrested and all of the consequences that the dictatorship might have imposed on them. And I find that really like contradicting to like what Facundo is saying about how dancing for him was total freedom, and how the history in Argentina has always kind of like been restricting that freedom for the Afro-Argentine community.
Okay, so my clip is also on Carmen Pelusa, so she was a dancer. And I chose this clip because it's very refreshing to hear her talk about her family.
Me llenó de muchas satisfacciones hasta el día de hoy, con todos los años que tengo. Que soy feliz y que te digo la verdad, y yo siempre digo lo mismo: si yo volviera a nacer, quiero volver a nacer en la misma familia, con los mismos hermanos, con la misma madre, con el mismo padre, más allá que no fue un buen padre, pero no importa. Pero mi mamá suplió ese lugar muy bien, porque a pesar de que ella tenía la gran responsabilidad de encaminar a 6 hijos, 7 porque uno falleció, lo hizo bien, porque nosotros siempre buscamos salir adelante y ser algo más y ser mejor, y no buscamos, porque estábamos en un barrio marginal, la vida fácil.
Okay, so I feel like this is a very it really stuck to me. She said, if I were to born again, I would like to be born in the same family. And I feel like that's just such a strong idea that she would choose her family again and again and again. And yeah, I chose it because I feel like it was so refreshing to hear so much emotion and just love for her family.
Thank you all for sharing those clips and sharing your thoughts. I want to highlight that we are using DCM-NY as our open platform for the oral history collection. It should be populated by late summer 2024. We're collectively collaborating on the metadata creation now as a team. This is just a brief kind of snapshot of what it looks like currently. But the collection will be available on DCM NY later this summer. We're hoping to do a few different things with the collection. We want to continue to grow it. And so we're actively seeking more grant funding to be able to do that. We also want to be able to teach with it, not just at Barnard, but beyond, and hopefully host some community archive events in the future and share the collection out more. Again, I really just want to thank Metro for awarding us its grants. And if you have any questions for us, feel free to ask. But thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Julia and Mila and Manuela and Destiny for participating in this project and bringing it to life. And thanks, Tracy, for facilitating today.